So Ghislaine Maxwell didn't testify in her own defense at her criminal trial, but she did give civil depositions. She was incredibly evasive. And when she wasn't evasive, she outright denied any of the conduct that is at issue here. But as you referenced, she was charged with 2 counts of perjury by the Southern District of New York. They didn't ultimately try her on those counts because they obtained convictions on the sex trafficking charges. And those convictions they believed were sufficient to put Ghislaine Maxwell away for a long time. That, of course, is now somewhat in doubt because she's obtained that transfer to a lower security facility and because the president continues to dangle the possibility of a pardon to Ghislaine Maxwell. But if you listen to victims and their lawyers, if you listen to prosecutors, Ghislaine Maxwell's credibility has long been in doubt. And she has, in turn, tried to ruin the credibility of others. Simone, you and I were talking before we began, and I said that the Bloomberg reporting didn't much surprise me because although these were several thousand emails from a Yahoo account owned by Jeffrey Epstein, we have seen emails between the two of them in civil litigation, emails that have been unsealed. And one of them that has stuck with me that I have a picture of in my phone because it bothered me so much was Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein talking about Virginia Giuffre. She is perhaps the most famous victim and unfortunately died by suicide earlier this year. In 2015, I just want to pause there because that is a decade plus after Ghislaine Maxwell is telling Todd Blanche her work for Jeffrey Epstein has mostly wrapped up. This is the conversation that they have from Epstein to Maxwell. You can issue a reward to any of Virginia's friends, acquaintances, family that come forward and help prove her allegations are false. And then he continues to detail what he thinks are her strongest or most damaging allegations. And there are 2 of them. But the fact that they are having that conversation in 2015 as Ghislaine Maxwell is involved in a defamation lawsuit against Virginia Giuffre, Jeffrey Epstein behind the scenes, still at that point uncharged by the Southern District of New York, telling Ghislaine Maxwell secretly, you can pay money to people who say that Virginia is lying. That's heinous. And so I'm not surprised by today's reporting. We should congratulate our friends at Bloomberg on that reporting coup. 18,000 emails is nothing to sneeze at, and I sure would love to get my hands on them and see them. But should we be surprised that Ghislaine Maxwell wasn't telling Todd Blanche the complete truth? Absolutely not.
Well, to just emphasize your point about how heinous that was, there's a statement today from the family of Virginia Giuffre. This is what they write. These emails from Bloomberg only further illustrate why the DOJ should never negotiate with someone willing to do or say anything to secure a deal. Ghislaine Maxwell deserves to rot in a maximum security prison for her heinous crimes. The fact that she has been afforded the luxury of sitting in a minimum security prison is a disgrace to our sister, survivors, and the justice system. This is corruption at its finest. It's time to stand firm and demand justice for all survivors. No more excuses, no more delays. I think what I was reminded of today by the Bloomberg reporting is that we talk about paths to accountability, some of the legal paths that we're seeing, whether they be in the form of lawsuits, some of these efforts on the part of the House Oversight Committee, the Kana Massey discharge petition. But there's also the reality that good journalism puts the focus back on these survivors, on these stories, and points out holes in Ghislaine Maxwell's own retelling of the story.
Absolutely. And I want to highlight another journalist who's done sensational work in this area, Julie K. Brown, who was the first person perhaps to really thoroughly excavate what had happened here. She has an ongoing legal proceeding to unseal even more of the civil litigation files. And there's been a recent Second Circuit decision that has put it back in the hands of a district court judge here in Manhattan to unseal more of those files. And so we can and expect more of these things to come out, not through a congressional investigation, not through the DOJ's own willingness to share it with us, but because there are people like Jason Leopold and his team at Bloomberg and Julie K. Brown and the Miami Herald, and perhaps even some folks here at MSNBC who will uncover more of that truth. Alicia.
I want to shift to the future, short term. A week from now, you're going to have depositions beginning. The schedule right now starts on the September 19th with Alex Acosta, then goes to Eric Holder, Merrick Garland, James Comey, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton. Acosta is a big piece of this storyline, and we've talked about that. I'm curious your thoughts about the rest on that schedule. What does that say to you? Why do you think they're being called? What do you think they have to offer, legal versus political?
Let's start with Merrick Garland, because that's the one that I have the biggest question mark about. To my mind, Merrick Garland doesn't belong on this list. At the time that Merrick Garland was the Attorney General, Ghislaine Maxwell was approaching trial, and the Department of Justice has said, and this is one thing that I continue to believe from administration to administration is in fact the case, that while there are many people who sanction the conduct, turn the other way to the conduct, that is a political and an ethical abomination. But what it's not is a crime. And so was there anything further for Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice to follow up on while he was Attorney General? I don't think so. I think most of those people against whom the Department of Justice at the time could predicate a criminal investigation were investigated. And one more thing, Michael, that I want to add here. When we talk about criminal accountability, it's complicated. A lot of the people that could have been held responsible are people that we might see in a new light today, like Haley Robson, who stood up at that press conference and said, "My life has been ruined. Death threats have been lodged against me. I have been described as a co-conspirator, but in actuality, I was Jeffrey Epstein's victim. Did I recruit other people to lessen the impact and the harm on me? Yeah, I did that. But one of the reasons you don't see more people having been prosecuted is because I would venture a guess that Haley Robson is far from alone in that there are scores of other women that in the press and media have been described as recruiters, but in actuality, and hopefully some of them will come out of the shadows and talk further, in actuality, they themselves were abused by Jeffrey Epstein for years.
I just will note that there is criminal accountability, and then there is some of the actions are not criminal. And the UK ambassador is a good example. UK fired its ambassador to Washington over the emails to Jeffrey Epstein, not saying that he participated in any of the conduct, but the mere association.
Just the way it was. Lisa Rubin, thank you so much for being with us.
Justin, we have new details on the school shooting outside of Denver yesterday. CNN's Whitney Wild joins us with the latest. Whitney, what are you learning?
Well, there's some top headlines here, but just to get our viewers up to speed, this shooting happened yesterday afternoon around 2:24 p.m. That was in Mountain Time. This is a large high school. This is 900 kids. There was a student who got onto campus, according to law enforcement, took the bus to school and began shooting at fellow students. 2 classmates are still in critical condition at the hospital. The shooter died of self-inflicted gunshot wound yesterday. Here are the latest updates, Boris. They have now identified that shooter as 16-year-old Desmond Holly. Again, they say he was a student at Evergreen High School. This is about 45 minutes west of Denver. The spokeswoman for this area, this is the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, spokeswoman Jackie Kelly, made the point that this shooter appears to have been a blend of a targeted but somewhat random shooting. And she said that because what they understand about how this happened was the shooter went into the school and began shooting many times. She could not even give a definitive number of how many times the shooter shot, saying only that the shooter was using a single revolver handgun and reloaded multiple times. And when asked how many times the shooter shot, she simply said, a lot. Right now, law enforcement is commending the actions of both the students and teachers who sadly know this routine very well. They had practiced it. They say that is the reason that so many lives were saved. Here's more from spokeswoman Jackie Kelly.
The students and the staff at the school were amazing. They did their job, they did it well, and lives were saved yesterday because of the actions they took during their lockdown drill. We know that the suspect had a handgun. He had to keep reloading. He would fire and reload, fire and reload, fire and reload. This went on and on. And as he did that, he tried to find new targets. And he came up against a roadblock on many of those doors. He couldn't get to those kids.
Boris, what Kelly also said is that the school normally does have a school resource officer. They used to have a full-time resource officer, but now they are working on a blend because that school resource officer, who's normally full-time, was on medical leave. And at the time, a school resource officer was on campus until 10:30, 2 hours before the shooting, but had been dispatched to a traffic accident. So at the very moment of that shooting, there was no school resource officer on campus, Boris.
Whitney Wild, thank you so much for the update.